Okay, so this is the first part of a series of videos just kind of introducing the idea of taxes. So in these examples, we're going to be just looking at the supply and demand of for medical marijuana. And again, we just have the basic supply and demand curve. Nothing new there. You know which one is which. So in this, I'm asking you to do the following. Identify the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity just before any tax is imposed. Show the consumer surplus and producer surplus at that market equilibrium, and show the net benefit. And actually, I'll just say show the net benefit period, just to kind of reinforce the basic concepts. So anyway, this is just kind of practicing some basic concepts that we're going to use when we start applying a tax in subsequent videos. So first of all, equilibrium price and quantity, the usual very straightforward thing. You're looking at that intercept between the supply and demand curve, dropping the line down, so the equilibrium quantity is 75 pounds. The equilibrium price is about 250. We won't worry about it being exact. I'm just kind of reinforcing this idea graphically of what's going on. So first thing is, so we've done that. So we've identified the equilibrium price and quantity. I'll just make this a little smaller here. So we need to show the consumer surplus and producer surplus. So what we'll do here is the consumer surplus is defined as the difference between what the individual consumer is willing to pay and the price actually paid. So graphically, that's just the area between the price, the market price, and the demand curve, since the demand curve is just the marginal willingness to pay. So consumer surplus is just this triangle here, and we'll just shade it in. So in certain respects, this represents all the kind of additional benefits or the benefits above and beyond the kind of resources that consumers had to give out, had to pay in order to buy the good, but since some of them are willing to pay much more for the good than what they actually paid, they're getting an individual surplus. And so this triangle, this red triangle, simply represents the sum of all those benefits of all those consumers purchasing the good and benefiting from the good in the market, all summed together. Obviously, if you're not buying the good, you're not generating any benefit, since this is seen as a traditional good. Okay, next idea is the producer surplus. Again, the producer surplus is defined as that the value between what the price received for the good and the resources, or in this case the marginal cost, going into producing that additional good. So again, producers have to expend a certain amount of resources, use a certain amount of resources to produce goods. Then they get money back for selling the good, and the difference between what they sell the good for and the value of the resources going into the production of the good, that's the producer surplus. You can think of that as a profit idea. Okay, so let's show that. So graphically, it's simply the area between the price received for the good and the marginal cost line, or the supply curve. That's the same thing. So again, we'll just show this as the triangle, and I'm just coloring it in. And so that blue triangle represents the producer surplus. Okay, so what you should be realizing is that the consumer and producer surplus fits in with the idea of the net benefit. So what that means is, if we look at just net benefit, in fact, maybe I'll just, so net benefit is equal to total benefit minus total cost. So what we can do is say, okay, total benefit, the total benefit is simply the area under the demand curve. So that's all the benefits received. We're not taking into account any prices here, what has to be paid. We're just saying when these consumers consume the good, what is the total amount of benefit received. So in this case, I will kind of do the red again. I'm not sure how to change the color, but anyway, the total benefit generated at 75 pounds of marijuana. So again, this is medical marijuana, so this is okay. So total benefit would just be this total area under the demand curve. Okay? Okay, so we're not having to take into account what they pay. We're just saying they consume a good, they generate a certain amount of benefit. Now, in terms of the total cost, again, we just go back to our usual idea of total cost is represented by the area under the marginal cost curve. Marginal cost curve is also the supply curve. So what we have here is this triangle right here. So the area under the marginal cost curve up to 75 pounds represents the total cost. So if we look at the difference between the total benefit, this polygon here, subtract out the total cost, this triangle here, the net benefit is this remaining triangle, which is the same thing as the sum of the consumer and producer surplus. So net benefit is just combining the consumer and producer surplus. So there, you can think of those as equivalent ideas. Okay, so that's the basic mechanics. I would also ask you to think about what's happening when the quantity is less than the market equilibrium. How would you look at that producer and consumer surplus and how they would produce the net benefit, since the sum of producer surplus and consumer surplus is the same thing as net benefit. And anyway, just kind of work with those, okay? And what I'm going to do is just move on to the next slide. And basically, this is the key, just kind of cleaned up a bit. You can see the equilibrium price and quantity. So the equilibrium price was about 230. Again, what we have here is the consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the sum is the net benefit. Okay? So hopefully this was just a good basic review, gives you a chance to kind of get up to date on the methods we're using, and we will move on to the next video where we actually start talking about the tax.